Hello, hello, hello! On the journey from being fully brought into the lie of party politics to the realisation of elite theory, people tend to go through a phase of wondering whether we on the right can use the regime's containment tactics against them, and whether power can be gained through infiltrating said regime. If we can get enough guys in there loyal to us, then eventually we can take over, right? Wrong. Alas, many people are still of this opinion, with some being quite immune to realising their error. Hence, I decided to create this. If I've done my job properly, this video should wake the wannabe Entryists up from their understandable delusion and leave them with a far better understanding of the natures of both the regime and of true power. Allow me to explain. Before I try to dispel the Entryists delusion, I should first present the case in its best argued form. Typically, Entryists are wise to the general nature of the regime. They understand that all the political parties work together for the same interests. They understand that all mainstream platformed opposition is controlled opposition, aka containment. They understand that the political and philosophical beliefs and values of the masses are generally implanted in a top-down manner, and they understand that raw populism is delusional. What they wish to achieve is the takeover of those institutions that appear to operate the containment and appear to create and enact state policy, such that they would be the ones in control. The general plan for how to do this is as follows. First, they stealthily enter into mainstream institutions, especially political parties. Then they toe the establishment line for years whilst they climb up the hierarchical ladder, until such a point that they, the secretly based Entryists, hold enough key positions such that they are in control. From here, they may try to shift the Overton window in their preferred direction, use their resources to red pill the masses, or continue their Entryist efforts by trying to make it even further up the official hierarchy. Once in power, the idea is then to use containment tactics of their own, including using the method of culture hacking recently laid out in Academic Agent's video this week, with the ultimate aim of harnessing popular support as a shield against attacks from the old regime, enabling the Entryist patriots to put the country back on the straight and narrow. On paper, okay, this sounds like a good plan. And hell, if we truly lived in an individualist meritocracy, it might even be possible. Alas, we don't, so it isn't. But why not? First of all, one must be aware that the regime is canny to entryism and knows about the theory of the long march through the institutions. As such, the establishment has defences against such efforts. If we were to follow the Entryist plan, the first problem we'd run into is the depraved requirement for promotion to the top elite positions. The regime, owing to the insanely dishonest nature of its rule, both in terms of what it's for and how it maintains power, is incredibly distrustful of its own elites. No honest person would willingly and wittingly sign up to a life of bold-faced lies for the sake of enriching high verbal IQ merchant elites. The only people who would sign up for that are either from the high verbal IQ group and/or are disgustingly power-hungry. The in-group loyalty aside, the power-hungry are just about the last sort of people you'd want to trust, as they would betray you whenever they believe it to benefit them. As such, the regime only accepts such people if it feels it can control them. And how does it control them? Through blackmail over the worst sorts of degenerative acts. Many of you may have already wondered why so many celebrities, journalists and top politicians seem to have skeletons in their closets. Why did so many politicians go to Epstein's Island? Why does seemingly every other BBC host get done at some point for being a nonce? Why were there rumours of Sir Keir Starmer shacking it up with Labour donor Lord Ali? All of these people are compromised. Moreover, to even rise to such a notable position, one must be compromised. One analogy that's often used for the elites is that of Cersei Lannister. By the end of Game of Thrones, she is brutal, unemotional, totally realistic about power, totally devoted to having power, capable of the worst atrocities, and notably to boot, she's also incestuous. This is your archetype of the modern top elite. If a person does not approximately fit this mould, they do not get to become a top elite. However, I should note that there are of course some exceptions, with one notable exception being Liz Truss, but we all know what happened there. For the sake of those who don't, Liz Truss rose to the top of the official hierarchy, becoming Prime Minister, and she tried to pursue a path other than that desired by the establishment elites. Frankly, Liz Truss was too daft to ever pose a real threat, nor was she a real dissident. I mean, she appointed Mr. Right Response, Mr. Chatham House, Mr. Matthew Goodwin as government advisor, but still Liz Truss dared to go against the regime script in her small way, and for her sins, the institutions of international finance conspired together to unceremoniously coup her from her position. Even as Prime Minister, she was not the one in charge. So, as far as it goes for any plans of entryism, you will not be permitted to rise to any significant level of decision-making power unless the regime has enough damning information on you that they trust that you will cave to their demands, at which point you are useless. In fact, you will never be able to do anything. Why? Because you do not have true power. A couple of months ago, I made a video called The Alarming Nature of True Power. Unfortunately, for a video that I believe to be foundational to a sensible understanding of politics, hardly more than 300 people watched it. If you count among that number, then thank you, but if not, then I cannot recommend it more, as it truly is vital for any understanding of how to gain control, which is exactly what Entryists want, or indeed what any of us want. In any case, the brief version is as follows. True power consists of the lesser element of persuasion and the greater element of coercion, aka perceived destructive capacity. If you can plausibly threaten mass destruction, the tanking of the economy, the release of damning blackmail, the halting of vital services, or anything else like this, you have true power. Only then are you in a position to negotiate or enforce your will. At the moment, the true right has practically zero true power. Short of adopting radical negotiation strategies that I can't even mention, which I obviously disavow, there is almost nothing we are currently able to do. At the moment, regardless of how far we get with entryism or building a parallel economy, there is nothing to stop the state from simply shutting us down. Also, one must realise that though the establishment does have some power of its own, it is primarily operated on behalf of other groups who also hold true power, meaning that even if entryist efforts into the establishment were total in their victory, the external holders of true power would be able to bring the captured institutions down. Ultimately, a managerial, bureaucratic, nominally liberal democratic regime like our own works partially to enrich itself, but primarily in the interest of these external powerful client groups, the people who own the country and employ the country. Part of understanding this is also recognising that the regime is not ideological. It may at times pretend to be, but this is a facade. Behind that facade, things are run exclusively for the benefit of the various client groups, and these client groups tend to know exactly what's in their best interests. Unless you hold true power, your voice does not matter, and persuasion is near useless. This is why the regime is far more willing to let in massive waves of third worlders so that top capitalists can lower wages than it is to shut off the migration for secret, stealthy, lefty reasons or whatever the plan is. So much for using their containment against them. They know what they want, they know what's in their interests, they're not going to fall for your BS. Containment is a good tool to maintain and obfuscate power, but it doesn't do much to help you gain it. Lastly, part of the effort of right-wing entryists appears to be the entry into cultural media to propagandise right-wing ideas. Whilst this may of course have a large effect, it fails to get at the real problem. As I've just said, persuasion is near useless, especially as compared to coercion. Also, as AA has written before, the belief in populism is delusional. However, what most people who try to quote-unquote red pill the normies fail to observe is that the normies are already red pilled. Unless you're working in some HR office or hipster cafe in Birmingham, Bristol or Brighton, your colleagues probably hold some pretty conservative opinions, as do your mates, as do the geezers down at the pub. The average, everyday men and women of this country are already fed up with the government, fed up with the immigration, fed up with the low IQ foreigners, fed up with the climate stuff, fed up with the woke, and fed up with the cost of living crisis. Even when polled by people ultimately working for regime interests, the number of people who think that all politicians are crap number very highly. These people don't need red pilling, they're already pretty based. In fact, by trying to red pill them, you are realistically only encouraging them to engage in the system, which is exactly what the regime wants. What the people need is not convincing, but organising. A large part of the problem of the right today is that we've been targeted by so much containment and deliberate obfuscation of power that very few people indeed have the understanding, capacity and will to become an organised, true right-wing elite. Would pushing a right-wing message help to funnel people towards more productive efforts? Sure. However, the very existence of this channel should show that one does not need to join the establishment to get the message out there. If anything, joining the establishment would only serve to limit what one feels able to say. And if the establishment ever got a whiff of what you were trying to do, regardless of how high up the ladder you had climbed, they'd employ the layers of media, finance and even the security state to ensure that you are thrown out and put away. They would even go as far as to accuse you of the worst sort of moral crimes, even if you never did them. To be fair, this also applies to independent dissidents to some extent, but it certainly doesn't help to work for the very people who want you gone. Anyway, that about covers it. I've mentioned and hinted at the Long March through the institutions throughout this video, but it's important to remember that the Long March simply didn't work. Sure, at times the regime may appear to be radically left-wing, but with the woke now clearly put away, it should be far clearer that the regime is not ideological, but instead entirely Machiavellian. Whether individual elites within the regime have their own stances is irrelevant to the direction of the regime on the whole. The only policies pushed are those that benefit the powerful client groups and secure the regime's power. Ultimately, for all the hype around the march through the institutions, it is still capitalists, not communists, who run the United Kingdom. So no, you cannot win by infiltrating the regime, nor do I think you should try. Rather than spending your professional life working for them and helping them whilst under the personal delusion that you will one day flip to serve the true right, give that up and serve the true right directly here and now. Get organised, build self-reliance, network, go to the pub, join the basket weavers, start a YouTube channel or a Substack. Whatever it is you feel, just don't think you can win by working for the man. Anyway, with that said, thank you for watching. The content of this video ought to be heard by a great many people on the online right, so if you do feel like getting the message out, then liking, subscribing and sharing will go a long way. Even watching this far into the video has already been a great help, so thank you. Other than that, I hope I did the subject justice, so please do let me know what you think, and if there are any questions you have or points of disagreement, I'll be only too happy to respond in the comments. Lastly, as the saying goes, if you lie down with dogs, you get up with fleas.